Hey folks, before we hit the music, I just want to take a quick moment to let you know about a really big fucking announcement. The Multiplayer Doom Federation has joined the fold of those who will be putting on QuakeCon at home events. So, I present to you the Take the Crown Doom 2 FFA tournament. This will have a $750 prize pool, and you can check it out Saturday, August 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time Zone. That will be for the group stage, and then the next day, Sunday, August 9th at noon Eastern Time, get on twitch.tv/Bethesda and watch the finals. It's that simple. It's going to be fucking amazing. I can't wait for it. If you are interested in more information, I recommend you head over either to inthekeep.com, our website, or to the Multiplayer Doom Federation's website, which is doomfederation.com, to get all the updated info. It's going to be fucking badass. Get your ass over there. Sign up. Make sure you tune in. Do it. Let's get into the show. Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. The Keep is a collective of gaming enthusiasts compelled by the drowned god Cathala to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Hello there, cultists. It is I, once again, the Motherlode, and you are in for a treat. This week's guest is none other than Awesreek. He is the developer of Viscerafest. It is a game that I have been following for a long fucking time, and I finally got to play the demo. I was super impressed. I've been begging him to come on the show forever, but finally this was the appropriate time. We got it done. He is amazing. Very inspiring young man. Very rare I get to say that. But I think you'll just be absolutely taken aback by the energy this guy brings to the table, the creativity he brings to the table, the overall ability to find exactly what it is about a game that he likes, and the drive to put it into what you will eventually get to see in Viscerafest. It is phenomenal. Really, really cool game. So I'm not going to bore you for too long. The music you're about to hear is from the Viscerafest soundtrack by none other than Michael Markie, more colloquially known as Markie Music. And when it's over, we'll be in the Keep with Awesreek.
If we really want to get into what happened, I'd say we have to start when I was 8 years old. Because when I was 8 years old, I don't remember why. Growing up, I had an absolute love for just doing art and drawing and things of that nature. And at some point, I had gotten this intense and fascination with doing 2D and 3D animation. And I had asked my dad to see if he could find me like a 3D program that would allow me to like, or, just some program that would allow me to do like animation and things of that nature. So he found some like, I don't really know what it was. All I remember is that like the logo was like a purple butterfly or something like that. But it was like some piece of 3D animation software. And, this was like 2008. There was like no video documentation for this kind of stuff. Like YouTube wasn't even really like that much of a thing yet. And so being an 8-year-old trying to get into like a 3D animation program, which probably looking back wasn't as user friendly as a lot of the programs are nowadays, like all I really had to go off of was like their Sumerian text of a manual, and it was it's just an absolute nightmare to try and learn, and I couldn't wrap my brain around it, so I ended up dropping it pretty quickly. When I was about 12 years old, though, my dad ended up finding a program called Blender. And he was like, hey, I remember you had an interest in doing this kind of stuff, and I remember you wanted to do it. And I just stumbled across this thing, and it's got like tons of tutorials on their website and stuff. So I figured I'd let you know and see if you were interested in looking into it. So I did. And I got into I was practicing a lot with it, and unlike the other program, I was actually able to make headway with it, and I was actually making stuff, which, I mean, despite how terrible it probably is looking back at it, it was something. Like, with the other program, I wasn't able to do like anything. I had no idea. I didn't know how to use the program. Like, all I could do was add pre-made objects. I didn't know how to like model anything or anything of that nature. So going into Blender and having like all these resources and having all this stuff, I was able to very quickly pick up on how to actually use the tools. And I had been working with that for a while, and then on their website I had noticed they had like a tutorial for how to like use their game engine. I was like, wait, this thing has a game engine? I can make video games with this? Being a 12-year-old. So I immediately jumped at it, trying to make games and stuff with it. And I was like bouncing game ideas off my friends and stuff. And around the same time, I had been introduced to first-person shooters for the first time ever. I had before that point, I had like seen my cousins playing Halo, but I wasn't really able to like wrap my brain or what was like going on screen. Like, it was just, I was looking at it, but my brain just was not putting the pieces together. Yeah, when I was 12 years old, I think the first FPS game I ever played was Battlefield 1942, which my friend... It's actually funny, because my friend... I remember I was at my friend's house, and he had Return to Castle Wolfenstein and Battlefield 1942. And Battlefield 1942 wasn't very violent, and he didn't think my parents would be too happy with... him playing Return to Castle Wolfenstein with me. So he was like, yeah, let's play this one instead. Which is funny, because looking back now, I probably would have liked Return to Castle Wolfenstein more. That, and that friend is more of like a Call of Duty fan now, whereas like I'm the old school first-person shooters fan, despite the fact that I started with like a more military FPS style game. But I fell in love with Battlefield 1942. I absolutely loved it, and I just fell in love with the idea of first-person shooters in general. So I had gone in, and I was like, okay, I want to make a game like this, and especially because like I was a big fan of sci-fi, I wanted to make like a science fiction first-person shooter. But starting out, I had no idea what I was doing. I had like just figured out the thing had a game engine. I really didn't know how to build games with it. So like as I would need features or as I would need something, I would look it up online. I didn't really have any design documents. I had never made a game before. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was kind of just throwing crap at the wall to see what sticks. And in a lot of sense, I'd say that was kind of how like the first like year or two, and even a little bit beyond that maybe, of how like development went, where it was just like kind of trying to figure out what this game was going to be. And not just this game, because in addition to that, I had adopted this mentality of, if I ever get bored of a project, I'll just have another project laying in the background that I can jump to in case I get bored with this one for the time being. So then I was not only working on what would eventually become Viscerafest, but I was working on like this isometric combat game. I was working on like this third-person action game. I was working on like a 2D platformer or something like that. And it just... I think I want to say it wasn't till around like 2014 when what Viscerafest is now started manifesting. But back up to 2013, because 2013 was the year that I was introduced for the first time to Doom. Being 13, I didn't have a job. I didn't, it wasn't making any money of any kind, so I couldn't just go out and buy my own games. But I was kind of at that point getting a little bit tired of Battlefield 1942, and I started looking for like free games online. And for me personally, I've always had an intense preference for single-player games. So moving on into 2013, I was looking for like free-to-play titles because I didn't have any money. And I ended up finding a browser version of Doom's original shareware episode. And it sucked. Because the browser version used like the original Doom controls where you had to like use the arrow keys to like turn and move backward and forward. Period and comma was to strafe, and spacebar was to open doors, and control was to shoot or something like that. But like for some reason, I just like kept coming back to it because the other thing too is I was doing this during the time that I was technically supposed to be doing school because I was homeschooled. But yeah, I was playing it during the time I was technically supposed to be doing school. So, like, because it was in the browser, I couldn't save my progress. So I ended up, like, replaying episode 1 from the start a lot and not getting very far. It took me quite a while to, like, reach the end of episode 1 of the original Doom. But, like, for some reason, I just kept coming back to it. Like, there was something about it that, like, despite the crummy controls I was having to deal with at the time because, wasn't running it through a source port, something about it just kept pulling me back in. So moving into 2014 is when I actually got like the full game of Doom. And, I got a source port for it. And that was kind of the point where like Doom went from being like a fun little distraction type game I would play from time to time to being something that I just absolutely fell in love with. Because one of the big things I remember from from the time I was like playing first person shooters with all my friends and stuff was like I had a very run and gun style of play. I would run headfirst into everything and get mowed down, and my friends would be like, "What are you doing?" So I'd be like, I want to have fun, and to me, like just sitting around and popping up from cover or whatever, it's just not very entertaining. So like that was the way I played a lot of those games, and so like to finally have a game that like facilitated that kind of play to me, it was just like, oh man, this is like what I've been dreaming of. So I absolutely fell in love with it, and I was kind of like, maybe I want to like take my game in this direction because there's not really anyone doing anything like this anymore, especially around 2014. I mean, like the most old school first person shooter that had come out recently around that time that I can think of was the janky Rise of the Triad reboot, which I didn't even know existed at that time.
Yeah. Around that time frame, you had Duke Reloaded was canceled, obviously, and then you had Rise of the Triad and Rack were like, and Strafe. When was Strafe released? Somewhere around that.
Strafe was released like maybe like the demo, anyways, was released like 2015, 2016 time frame. Okay. But yeah, no. But I mean, like the other thing too was like I just didn't know about those games because most of what I was familiar with was like the big AAA, like Call of Duty. I think it was like Modern Warfare at that time, maybe Black Ops or whatever. But that was all I really knew. So like, kind of, it was like for me, it was a chance to do something that was like different from what everyone else was doing. Because I mean, even if we are considering those games, like those games are not like really pure first-person shooters. I mean, like for pure like old school first person shooters, they're still like elements. And Rise of the Triad is just weird. I mean, like I have a special place in my heart somewhere for Rise of the Triad, but like Rise of the Triad is its own thing.
Amazing soundtrack.
Yeah. So yeah, moving on from that, I made like this original. I started working on trying to figure out how I was going to like blend some of these elements into my game. And it was kind of a case of like taking what was initially a more like Halo style shooter and slowly eking it toward like that more old school first person shooter style of play. And originally, actually, I remember all of the art, all of the sprites and stuff were going to be like 3D models that I like converted into sprites, but I just couldn't get it to look good. So I ended up dropping that and just doing hand-painted sprites. But kind of the theme that now runs from... And actually, so this is a little bit of a theme that runs throughout the early development, too. What I would often do is I would work on the game. I'd get to a certain point, look back at what I had done, and I'd be like, I can do so much better than this now because there is so much I didn't know how to do before, and I could just improve it all now. Or it would be a case of like I hadn't accounted for something, and now there was some feature I needed that added, but like because of the way the game was built, there was just no easy way for me to incorporate it in. And so what I would do is I basically look at what I had, and I'd be like, I can't really do anything with this anymore. It would just be easier to start all over. And I did that again and again and again, like just with like when like it started taking that shift toward a more old school style approach to the overall game design, I must have restarted those builds at least 8 times. And that's not including like how many times I restarted the earlier ones from like 2012 to like 2014. So yeah, it was so kind of speeding up a bit and getting to the point where we are at now. I'd say like if I really wanted to trace back when Viscerafest started truly just like becoming something vaguely recognizable to what it is now, that would probably be back in 2016. I had just restarted the project again. I was starting to pin down an art style and an art direction because I before I'd been using sprites, but I had scrapped that version and started over trying with 3D models. The problem with that version I had just scrapped that was using the 3D models was just how buggy it was. And a lot of that was because of the 3D models, like, and just like the interference and fighting that was going on within the game engine, because I'll get to that in a minute. But so
we got an hour, man. We could talk about this, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Relax.
So I'd started the 2016 build. Around this time, I had been showing off the game to I'd gone to a camp. I had been showing off the game a bit to some of the other people who were there, and a friend of mine at the time, he had said, "Hey, do you need a composer?" And originally, I was going to compose all the music myself, despite the fact that I have no knowledge of how to compose music. So he's like, yeah, I could use like a composer. So he hopped on. He had done like 2 tracks, and I'll get to him in a minute. But I was working on like that 2016 Blender build.
Easy.
Oh yeah, it was wonderful, and like that was when the game was really starting to take shape. But it was also the point at which I was really starting to feel the limitations of the engine, because I was getting further with that version of the game than I had with any other version of the game up to that point. Like, I had gotten to the point where I was actually making the very first level, which, if you play the demo, was that was C1L1, which is it opens with like you're in like a cell block, and there's like this execution pit, and you get the pink key card, and you go up and you see like the pink key door, and you use that to open the door, and it ends in like this giant battle arena. That level was the first level I had ever made. That level is 1/7 of the size it was supposed to be, because I had originally drawn out this entire like layout, and that was just like the opening to the level, right? But I had kind of gotten impatient with making that level, so I was like, you know what? I just want to test and see how this feels to play. Throw a few enemies down, and go from there. I had started filling out the level, and then I went to play it, and I started noticing it ran terribly. And I was like, what is going on? And I very quickly found out that the limitations I had on what I could do with enemies was choking. It was utterly devastating. Like, I've talked about it before, but the limitations I was running into were to such an extent that, and it ranges from level to level, by the way, in that old Blender version, I could only have a max of 18 enemies at a level at a time. And if I was using like spawners, like spawning them after the fact, then I could only have like a max of like maybe 23 if I was lucky. And like I said, that's including like spawning them after the fact. Like throughout the entire level, like I could have no more than like 23 enemies at best. It was terrible. But the thing that I do think is great about that is like once like toward the end of like that Blender version's development, that it really became a problem because there were some levels I could not have more than 8 enemies in without the frame rate tanking to like from like 100 to 40 just with like one enemy. So the thing that was great about it was it really forced me to, I'll say, actually design levels. Because the thing is like I think that opening section of level 1 is actually great. I actually like that. The C1L1 has changed very little since I had originally made it. It's mostly just in like minor facelift elements that I've changed. I'm very happy with how that level's turned out. But everything past the point where that got cut off was garbage. It was massive long hallways, massive empty rooms. It was like just the most padded out filler you could possibly imagine. And having that limited of an enemy quantity that I could actually play with in the levels really forced me to like make the most of what little space I could actually get away with. You know, because it's like you can't have like massive levels that aren't like, you know, just like giant empty spaces in them, because then it's kind of boring just walking around and like seeing like one enemy and like this big open area or something. So I really had to like figure out like to just like basically take all my ideas in this level and just like refine it down to the shortest possible experience that still had enough teeth to be there, but was you know, something that like that didn't last super long, so that way I didn't have to like sparingly place enemies in a way that felt very awkward and very like just, you know, again, you walk into a room and there's like one enemy when it feels like this entire space should be filled with enemies. But yeah, so toward the end of development on that Blender version, I had kind of hit a brick wall because we had basically wrapped up development on Chapter 2, and I was starting work on Chapter 3. And it was becoming painfully apparent just how unplayable the game was for everyone. Frame rate, you had to have like a decent to beefy PC to run the thing even remotely well. But even then, there was no guarantee that it would run well because the Blender game engine is a janky, unfinished, unpolished mess that I ended up just... So basically, there are several people who couldn't run it well despite the fact that they had specs that should have more than allowed them to run it perfectly. The game itself, so like a bud of mine, he had been able to play like prior versions of the game, but when we sent out the beta for Chapter 2, the game wouldn't even open, and not only would the game not even open, but now it had corrupted prior versions of the game on his PC. So even if he had like completely wiped the game from his PC and downloaded like the prior versions of the game, he could not get it to run anymore. And stuff like this kept on happening, and it just kept piling up, and it was like crushing me and weighing me down, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't ship the game in this state, but there's like nothing I can do to fix this because the engine is such a piece of crap that there's like nothing to salvage here. So I had priorly, and also around 2016, a bud of mine was, well, he wasn't a bud of mine at the time, But there was an indie game I was following because I loved to follow like other smaller projects around that time called Nexum. It was a team-based arena first-person shooter with like where the characters had like almost like Team Fortress style 2 classes and stuff like that. And this was like before Overwatch was the thing. It had been in development for a while at that point. A guy called Bounty X Snipe was running the thing, and they were at a point where they wanted to get art assets into the game. And I'm like, well, I'm fairly competent at making like art assets and like doing concept art and stuff like that. So I figured like I'd volunteer to do work for them, and they really liked the stuff I did for them. That game ended up getting canceled, or I should say shelved. He might end up picking it up again at some point. I don't know. But the problem is just that development had kind of lagged on for a while, and around that point, Quake Champions had come out, Overwatch had come out, and these games were doing things that were very similar conceptually, and there were other arena shooters that had come out by this point, and they had all kind of just flopped. So he was feeling very discouraged, and he didn't really have a desire to carry on with that game. So he's moved on now to working on another game. I can't remember exactly what it's called. It's got like a ninja cat as the main character. But one of the programmers on that game was really loved what I was doing with Viscerafest. He was Fireplant Games. And he had been talking to me, and he wanted to work with me for a while. And he was actually constantly nagging me. So like, when are we going to port this thing to Unity? And I was just like, shut up. Because, I just wanted to get the game done. I didn't want to like restart it all over again by that point in time. Because, I was like, man, this has been going on for a while. I don't need to like make development drag on for a couple more years. So I just wanted to get the Blender version of the game done. But eventually I just got to a point where, like I said, it had broke me. And I called him up and I was like, hey, so how long do you think it's going to take to port this thing over to Unity? And he said, about a month. Yeah, so he said about a month. No. It was to get like I said, how long do you think it'll take to get like all the weapons and all the enemies and like maybe the first level into Unity? He said about a month. I said, okay. So we started. So I was like, okay, let's get started. So right away, because like we had been talking, like I said, about working on a future project together, and we had been throwing around some like beta test ideas for like what we would do for like the movement controls and stuff like that in Unity, which we ended up kind of partially adopting for this version of Viscerafest. Some of the stuff ended up getting cut because it just wasn't going to work with this game. Yeah, so we basically took some of what we had there and we started working on porting it over into, or porting Viscerafest over into that and kind of retaining some of the movement elements from the beta test we were doing on that stuff. And it took a lot longer than a month. We don't even have all the enemies and weapons in yet. But the reason for that is more so because the game has moved from the point of it's no longer really just us porting what we had in the Blender version over to the Unity version. Like, we really are basically remaking the game from scratch. So much of the Blender stuff has been changed, and so much of it has been updated so drastically that it's not even recognizable. And especially the latter parts of the game are like that old stuff is completely unusable now. I'm going to be completely remaking chapters 2 and chapter 3 and the latter half of chapter 1, which you guys have gotten to play the first half of chapter 1, obviously. But we've basically taken on just completely remaking the full thing from scratch, which is honestly the wisest decisions we'd ever made, because I don't think the game would have shaped up as well as it has been had we not decided to go that direction. And that's just like the story from like the game development. Like, honestly, like I could go into like the history of the actual narrative itself, and because there's so much lore for the thing, and it's evolved and changed so much over the years. And then there's so much background stuff. It's just like I struggle to remember it all. There's so much to talk about the development of this thing that I could not possibly hope to cover it in any reasonable amount of time. But I think that's a good enough point to give you an idea of like why the game has been in development for 8 years. So
let's take a step back here. Let's move you over here to the psychoanalysis couch and kind of dissect what we've got so far. So here's what I've picked up. I've been taking notes.
Mhm.
You started basically learning how to develop shit in 2008 when you were 8 years old. So you were now, 20 years old?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome that you're you found your passion early. Like, that's actually a pretty beautiful thing. One of the things you were saying, about like how you said you were homeschooled and your dad was pretty, from what I could tell, supportive of you getting into this shit.
Mhm.
And like, how did that inform your process of learning things on your own? Because I was in the public school state education system, unfortunately, and I too was like an autodidact, but it's very different when you have to spend 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, or more if you have homework, basically having your time just stolen from you by the state.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'll let you continue.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, how did you think that shaped your ability to work on your own and to learn things on your own?
Well, for one, I just had more time because the thing is like with homeschooling, you can kind of do it at your own pace. So, like, if I wanted to, I could do like, say, 5 days worth of math classes in one day. It was that easy. Like, if I wanted to, I could totally do that. I mean, like, it might take a little bit more time out of my day to do it, but I could totally, like, some of the lessons were really brief, some of them were really long. So some of the stuff I was able to, like, breeze through large chunks at a time. Some of it took a bit longer. And I'd say, like, it left me more room and actual time to be able to work on this stuff. 2008 is not quite an accurate term for, like, when I started, because, like I said, 2008, I had asked my dad to get me a 3D animation program. Mm-hmm. 2008, he had found something for me, but I really wasn't able to, like, grasp much about it. I was throwing myself at it and trying to figure out by just trial and error, but I really couldn't wrap my head around that thing.
But the twinkle in your eye was already there. The spark had been set.
I was doing, like, stop motion stuff with Legos at the time. Mm-hmm. I was actually, so we had like a light box, like, you basically trace outlines and stuff. I had actually, like, taken, like, large sheets of paper, drawn on them, and then, like, I'd use, like, a camera to take pictures of all the pictures I had drawn, and I'd, like, use them to make animations in, like, Windows Filmmaker to, like, try, because, like, at the time, like, I didn't have, like, a drawing tablet or, like, a 2D animation software. So, like, that was the closest thing I could do to that. Like I said, I was doing lots and lots of drawing. Honestly, like, for a large chunk of my life, that was, like, my main passion was just drawing, because I loved coming up with, like, character designs, and I loved and I was pretty good at it too. I'm still pretty decent at it. I haven't had the time recently. So I was throwing myself at all these different things, trying to find something that sticked. 2012 rolled around, my dad found that program, and I was finally able to learn something. And I think, like, a lot of people have asked me, like, why did you stick with it so long? Because, like, I feel like any sane person would have probably quit at some point before, especially when you're that young. You don't have the patience for that kind of long-term working on this thing. And I'll say, like, there are several points where I was kind of thinking about quitting. But at the same time, I was kind of reaching this point where it was like, my central philosophy for why I kept restarting and trying to improve what I was doing was I just wanted to make something that was worth people's time. And at a certain point, I think I had kind of adopted this sunk cost. What is it? I'm trying to think of the phrasing for it. Like, the sunk cost fallacy, I think it's called, where it was like I had spent so much time working on this, I was just like, I have to see this through to the end. Like, I can't quit now. I have to see this. I have to make sure that I at least finish this, if nothing else. But yeah, I think the way it informed sorry, I tend to rant a lot. I think going back to your question about, like, how it informed my learning process, it was just like, I mean, it wasn't even that different from when I was how I was learning in school. Like, whether it be reading through courses or, like, videos talking about how you're supposed to do certain things, I would often have, like, a video open in the background. I'd watch what they were doing. I would just follow what they did for the tutorial. And once you pick up on that stuff, you can start to apply it to other areas of what you're working on. Because like once you know how to like model a dragon, you can apply that to modeling a lizard or modeling a character or whatever. And it was that kind of thing where I was just like, once I had learned enough to be able to actually competently do something, I was able to take it to a point where I could apply that to other areas of what I was trying to do. So yeah.
It's really interesting to me. I don't want to like place all of my thoughts or put words in your mouth, but that way of kind of managing your own time at that age and obviously you said having more free time and developing the drive to just do things yourself when you're not being like forced to, because kind of what we're kind of taught in the public school system is follow the bell, do what you're told, walk around, like you're for some reason they think that putting you on a schedule, for some people sure this works, but not for people like me, they think that putting you on that strict schedule with strict directions is somehow going to foster creativity. And I don't even think that's their goal. I don't think they want creative people. They want people who do what they're told. But for in your case, do you realize how intellectually mature it sounds for you to say something, let alone as a teenager, but now, I mean, even at 20, to say something like, I just want to make something that's worth people's time. That statement alone says so much more. That one sentence told me more about you than the whole rest of that monologue. Because I don't know, a lot of people really don't put that together. I'm sure there's 40, 50-year-old people that still haven't put that together. You seem to care not only about your creative freedom and your ability to make the game that you want to make, but also how it's going to be received. A lot of people at this point in time struggle with that. They're like, I don't even know why I do it. They've put no thought into that. And that's not even a criticism. It's just a maturity thing. This is pretty astounding. Like you're 20 years old and you're already making a game that is going to be published. You're, companies that are pretty damn legitimate in the gaming business are looking at what you do, paying attention to you. Dave Awesreek's retweeting shit, talking about like this game's gone so far since I first saw it. That is a really good situation to be in at this point in your life, dude. I'm very like impressed.
It's a dream come true for me, really, because I like getting to this point where like the game looks like this and it feels like this and it sounds like this and it plays like this. It like, because I'm trying to think how to phrase it. It's just, it's really the best feeling in the world to know that after so many years of just pouring myself into something, that it's paying off and people are loving it. Like, I like, because for me, there's no more satisfying a feeling than knowing you've made something that people love and that people care about and that people want to spend their time on. Like I said, it's just immensely satisfying. Because I mean, like, I can make something that appeals to me, and I am making something that appeals to me. Like, honestly, I was afraid that there were quite a few elements of the game that I was afraid people weren't going to like. I put a lot of time and thought and effort into it, and I've tried to, there's some things I'm obviously not willing to change my mentality on. But I, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that when people sit down and they play it, they have a good time. Because I feel like, one, there's so many other games they could be spending their time with. And if they're willing to take the time to, whether it be paying for it or just playing the demo, if they're willing to take the time, like, that's amazing to me. Like, somebody cares enough about what I'm doing to spend what little time they have on this earth to actually, like, experience something that I made for them. And, yeah, it's just, I've been kind of blown away. I was expecting some recourse after the demo's launch. But like I was not expecting, one, the sheer volume of people who've kind of taken a liking to it to suddenly be pouring into my server and talking about it elsewhere, and just like how positive they've been about it. I mean, like I've said before, like, the Unity version is such an improvement over what I had in Blender that it's almost not worth comparing the two. and I was expecting a more positive reaction than the Blender version was getting from people. I was not expecting people to be as passionate about it to the point where I've got a guy in my server who's not only speedrunning the thing every single day, but has been like endlessly replaying it like for hours at a time, just trying to like improve his time getting through the levels. Like, because like the demo's not that long. Like it's only like 20-40 minutes for most people. But like I've got people who are telling me just like, man, I could like sit here and play this and play this and play this. And it's just so encouraging to me to know, like, it feels like I've been justified in taking the time, and all like it's not been a waste of time for me to keep restarting this and to keep redoing it all. Like I'm finally getting to a point where the game is approaching some sort of finish line and isn't just in this endless cycle of purgatory.
Something that I hear a lot of, fairly successful down later in their career game developers talk about is how you have to finish a game, right? So let's just take John Romero, for example, right? He started off programming really young, and he was mailing in games, like just code, to magazines so that people could punch it into their computer and play like these really short, simple, kind of, by today's standards, extremely rudimentary games. But he was finishing projects, right, and just turning them over and over and over again. And then by the time that Wolfenstein and Doom shipped, those guys had a resume. You've taken a sort of a different route, which is pretty interesting to me, where you've committed to this project and you're like, I will continue to remake it over and over again until it becomes what I want it to be. And I think that's going to be really interesting when you do finish it and you have that under your belt, where you go from there. Because, yeah, like I said, this has been a long time coming, and I know that's going to be a huge monkey off your back.
So I guess in terms of my mentality, I totally understand where like John Romero and like Carmack and and not just them, but like you see people who like are giving advice on like making games, and they're just like, start out simple, make something small, don't go big. And I've given that same advice to people because it's good advice. It really is. Like everyone wants to start out making the biggest, coolest thing, but if you do that, one, you're either going to be at it for a hell of a long time if you're just starting and learning how to do this crap. But two, you're very likely to get burned out. You're going to reach a point where it crushes your soul what you're doing, and you're just not going to be able to keep walking. And not only that, but like, with how little time people have nowadays, it's like, working on a game is a time commitment. Like, you are spending massive chunks of your life working on this thing. You have to pour, like, especially if it's going to be like, if it has any sort of scale to it, like, that's why people say start small. Because, if you can just like finish a project, like that in and of itself is very like rewarding and relieving. Just being able to like get to a point where you have something done. I've talked about in the past, I've talked to people about like, I don't like it. There's been a trend lately in like retro shooters of like having these levels that are like an hour long or something like that, rather than just being like these condensed shortened experiences. And I think like the thing that people miss when they're doing that is you end up getting into this mentality of like, it becomes more of a slog to actually get through your content, no matter how good it is, because you're never given that. Because like when you like reach the end of a level, you're given like this sense of like reward for like getting to a certain point. And it's kind of the same way with game development. It's like why everyone says start out small. Because when you start out small, when you're starting out, period, you have no idea how bad it's going to be. You have no reference for just how much sweat and tears even doing the simplest of things is going to be. Like, you're going to be pouring yourself into making your movement, making it so like you can't walk through walls or something stupid like that. Like, there are so many microscopic problems that come up within the sphere of game development that like it's a miracle anything gets done at all. Because what was it we were working on the remaking the thing in Unity, and we were having this problem where we wanted to like make enemies more visible, right? We had the shader that we were trying to make, where basically, so in the Blender version, I had just like making it so like, there's something where you have like full bright and you have just like, you know, an object's affected by light. Full bright being like everything is just the flat color that it is, and you know, obviously the other is there's dynamic light to interact and cast shadows and stuff like that. In the Blender version, that was just like one setting I could tick, and I made it so like it was sort of a halfway between, so like it was still affected by the lighting, but it would just show up brighter, so that way the enemies would stand out more. We wanted to do that. We spent probably weeks just trying to get that thing to work. We could not figure out for the life of us how to make it not suck. And or more than that, in the same vein of shaders, like at one point we had just hit a wall within Unity with like the renderer we were using at the time was allowing us to do, and we had to swap to a different renderer. But actually doing so became such a nightmare because so many things were broken when we did that. So many things were not showing up right when we did that. The game looked hideous when we did that. And so like we spent like easily a month or two just trying to make the game not look like crap. And like you run into problems like that all the time. And so it's like, even when you're starting out on a project that you think is like, oh, this is like tiny, you're going to run into problems you had no idea were even possible with your project. So it's the reason it's best to start out small is because it's going to take you way longer to even make that small thing than you think it's going to. So like starting out small, making sure that you can actually finish something is going to be so much more rewarding than starting out on a project like Viscerafest, which is like a full single player campaign, because that problem, that valley of issues that crop up when you're developing a game is only magnified by a million the larger the project gets. Because for every little thing you do, there are 1,000 ways in which it could break. And so yeah, like I totally get that perspective, and I don't disagree with it. Honestly, if I were to go back in time, I probably would have told myself the same thing. Like just start out on something small. But I think like at the same time, for me, I've been lucky enough to be in a position where I have the time to brute force it, where I have the will to brute force it. And I've been willing to, even if it means that, like, you know, so much of that time, so much of that effort, so much of that work ends up getting tossed out the window. Because again, I don't want to make a game that, you know, people will sit down, they'll play, and they'll be like, this was just a waste of time. Or, you know, it's not good, you know. I want to make something that I feel people will want to return to, that people will want, like, even if they just enjoy it in a moment. Like, honestly, if it's just enough for me if people play the game and they're like, that was fun, probably never going to touch it again, but that was fun for, like, you know, the hour I spent with it or whatever it happens to be. Like, that's enough for me. If people walk away from an experience I've made and they at the very least enjoyed it, that is enough for me. But if I can push it farther, if I can make it better, if I can improve it in any way, if I can go beyond the simple boundaries of just making a game that's passably mediocre, then I want to.
One of the things that we touched on the other night when we were playing through the demo and you were watching was the episode, and specifically the length of levels. And when you were talking a little bit ago, talked about how people, generally speaking, have kind of gotten into that trend of making these like long kind of meandering levels. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but like if I can just speak from my point of view as someone who really likes this style of game, like, and I'll talk about like Doom mods, because I think that's a great, it has the full spectrum. It has everything from, you know, Jazz Jackrabbit Doom to Eternity and everything in between. And I really appreciate when levels are just straight to the point, fat is completely trimmed off, I can get through it in a single sitting, like, because I don't have time. Like, people think, oh yeah, he does this gaming podcast, he must play video games all day. it's really not that easy. Like I spend a lot of my time just doing this shit and not able to actually enjoy all the games. And also I have like a full-time fucking job and a wife and everything to deal with. And I know a lot of the people who are into boomer shooters because they're old as fuck, are busy people and they want to just sit down and get that adrenaline rush, play through a level, save, walk away, come back and knock out a couple more levels when they have some more time. And I don't know. I think that's a kind of a lost art because people, as you know, as an artists never think anything's done. They're like, oh, I have to keep going. I have to keep making more. I can always make this better. I can add more here. I can add more there. But there's an art to just think about SpongeBob with the marble, right? You want to just knock off the pieces that aren't there until you get down to specifically what you want. You want the statue of David. And then you put a Squidward nose on it. If you need to, if it requires that. But I really appreciated your point of view on that. And I know right now in development, the levels are maybe a little bit shorter than you intended.
Yes.
Can you shed some light on that?
So like I said, when I was working on the Blender version, I was incredibly limited in terms of what I was able to do with, enemy counts and stuff like that. So that meant I had no choice but to make sure the levels were as focused and as like to the point as possible.
Right.
Like to the point where I would say not only was fat trimmed off, but like entire chunks of level had to be trimmed off that might have actually been important because I just didn't have anything to do it with. But yeah, I had to cut a lot of stuff from levels because I just didn't have, I couldn't get it up to performance. But when porting over to Unity, I want to say it was maybe like 2 months before we launched the demo. I've remade a lot of the levels several times, but I wanted to do like one final pass on all of the levels that were in the demo before we shipped it. Because I wanted to make sure that they were of the highest bar quality I could make them. And there were a few levels that I was just like, this needs work. So I went through all the levels that are currently in the demo. And I think the level I touched the least was level 4. But really, at the end of the day, those levels specifically, they have been expanded upon since their original Blender versions. But they really are almost like, some of the levels are very, very different in layout and structure, don't get me wrong. But I'd say like the soul and the idea of the Blender version's level is still in the current Unity versions of those levels. So they kind of, like you said, they're very short. They're very brief. You could beat, like it for a first-time player, you might be able to beat them in like 5 minutes. If you know what you're doing, like me, you can easily knock them out in like 2 or 3. So, I'd say if the levels were longer, we might have actually had a few less levels than we ended up shipping.
Right.
We didn't want the demo to be too long, which is one of it's one of the reasons why we didn't include C1L5 and the rest of Chapter 1. There are some other reasons, but I'd say like the levels will eventually like get to a point and where they will be bigger. They're not going to be like. And I'm not throwing these under the bus, I want to say. Like, I'm not crapping on these. Like, the things I'm about to mention, they are fantastic in their own right. They are absolutely wonderful experiences. But you've got levels like, what is it? Unknown Sepulcher. You've got Eve Eternity. You've got, what was it? There was like this one Doom mod with like its own custom like weapon set. The guns were like all hell themed. I think it's called Hellbound or something like that.
Yeah, Hellbound.
Yeah.
Great mod, by the way.
Oh, it's a fantastic mod. But man, like some of those levels just keep going and they do not stop. And the thing for me, right, is because all you're really doing when you make levels that long is you are just you're holding out the player's sense of reward. So it's like, think of like you reaching the end of the level as being like a release for the player. At any point up until you reach the end of a level is kind of just like there's somewhat of a tension. There's somewhat of a like a level is its own closed off experience. Because like when a level keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going, the player is waiting for that release. The player is waiting for that endpoint. And when that endpoint takes longer and longer and longer to come, it's more and more likely the player is just going to drop an experience because they're not getting like that release. which I think is so important. I would rather play a mod or game that has a bunch of short levels, or like has like say what's supposed to be maybe one level split up into short levels, and just have a lot of short levels as opposed to a few long levels. But yeah, it's something that I just, it's a trend that I've noticed a lot lately. There have been so many mods in so many games. Wrath, again, like the Doom mods we mentioned, that just like they love to just make their levels keep going on and on and on. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying their levels are bad. I think they're wonderful, in fact. But at the same time, I do think that there needs to be more appreciation for more brief experiences, and not just like within levels, like let's like games themselves. I just like, like you mentioned, like people don't have time anymore. Like I don't want to spend 50 hours playing one game unless I have been replaying that game like 50 times.
Right.
because like if a game is good enough, I will replay it like 50 times. And heck, if a game is good enough, I might even want more of it if it's, not already 40 hours long. But like that's the thing for me. Like I don't like long experiences. I don't like games that last like 15 hours. I don't like games that last 20 hours. I mean, don't get me wrong. If I really, 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 really love a game, I'm more than happy for it to last that long, especially if it's able to retain my attention for that long. But more often than not, games just don't. Like, there's just not games that fill that kind of experience for me. And that's one thing I want to do with Viscerafest. Viscerafest is not going to be a super, super long game. If I had to guess, you're probably looking at most maybe 4 to 6 hours, which I think is like the perfect length. Like, I know like some people, the only thing I'm afraid of is that they're going to be the people who are whining like, why is this thing like cost me like $10 to $15? Don't you think that's a little bit much for a game that's only 4 hours long? Like I saw that a lot with Dusk. I saw it a lot with, a Medieval and all these other games that came out. Just people complaining over like, and it's like clear these people just don't understand, one, the amount of effort and work and time that has to get put into this stuff to make a game even that long. Especially with so few people actually working on the game. And not only that, but sure, yes, you can beat a game in 4 to 6 hours, but the question ultimately becomes, there are plenty of games that you could spend like 25, 30, 40 hours with, and they still won't end up feeling like they're worth the money you paid for them because of how long they are, because like what's actually there isn't even worth playing. Like, because a lot of that like time is just filler. It's just empty, voidless nothing. And I'd rather have a game that cost me like $20, is only like 4 or 5 hours long, that is nothing but like a focused, refined experience that I can just keep coming back to and enjoying over and over and over again, as opposed to something that just wastes my time but costs me more money, because because apparently length equals value. Which it's never been a mentality that I've understood, because again, I would rather spend more money on a shorter game that's worth my time than more money on a game that wastes my time.
It's really hard to put a dollar amount on quality, so that's unfortunately, I think, a trickle-down effect from the AAA industry, is that this, equating, we all say time is money, and to some extent it is. If you put out a game that was $10, $20, and I got to play it for 15 minutes, I'd be really fucking bummed. But you're not going to do that. And again, you have the replay value, you have difficulty settings eventually, and you have a lot of different routes you can go with that. But I think ultimately, it just really comes down to how much money was this experience worth to me in terms of the quality of experience. And also just straight up, like, for every person out there who's bitching about the price tag, there's people out there that would happily give you more money than that. And I'm sure you've seen this a bit, because they just want to support it. They love what you're doing on principle.
Yeah. And actually, going into what you said about replayability, like Viscerafest probably more than like any of the other ones coming out will have a lot more replayability, because some of the later levels where I'm actually planning on making are going to incorporate like entirely like off the beat secret paths that are like entire chunks of level, like significant chunks of level. Like I'm starting that with C1L6, where it's like you'll have entire encounters, you'll have entire areas that are just like you won't see unless you look for secrets. But going beyond that, you have the Scully system, which is it's loosely inspired by like collectathons and stuff like that, where it's like you've got all these pickups around the level. If you with these pickups, when you pick them up, you'll get credits, and you can spend those in the hub on like modifiers and cheats and stuff like that that you can use when you're replaying a level. Or beyond that, if you find all the Scullies in all the levels of a chapter, you'll unlock a cipher key, which you can use to unlock that chapter's bonus level. And then if you unlock if you find all the Scullies in all the bonus levels of each chapter, you'll unlock cipher keys for each of those levels, and then you can use that to unlock a bonus, an extra bonus level. And then going beyond that, post-launch, we plan to have New Game Plus, which will have it'll have a new weapon, which is exclusive to the New Game Plus. It will have new enemies for each faction, which is also exclusive to the New Game Plus. It will have retweaked enemy placements, so like all the late game enemies will appear early game. And the game will now be balanced according to basically starting out with all the weapons right off the bat. And like, so it'll be like a completely different experience just going through the game a second time when we get that stuff in. And then and like that already, like what I mentioned, like that's way more than like most of these other games offer in terms of replayability. But then like obviously there's still the other stuff like secrets and speed running for the people who want to do that. And the game is going to be so much more than just like your first playthrough.
That brings up a couple of points that I just kind of wanted to address with you. First of all, I do think the Scully thing is really cool. Like, I think that's a good move, and it's a really smart tool to get more playability out of a game and to incentivize people to revisit levels and things like that. I would also worry, and maybe you're already aware of this. Like, so let's just take like The Witcher 3, for example. I'm a real completionist, and most people aren't. Like they're just like really willing to, like, I'm just gonna blast through it and have fun. And I do that with some games, but some games, if I really like them, I'm gonna do every little thing I can, and I'm not even gonna move forward until I've completed everything that I can in that area. And I wonder and worry that if you're upgrading your character constantly like that, if someone really does just take it super seriously, are they gonna end up at the end of the game super overpowered like I was in The Witcher 3, where you can just mow everything down like a god?
No, there's no character upgrades. Okay. There's nothing bound to like upgrading your character. The Scullies are, like I said, they're using the hub to buy like modifiers and cheats. And what I mean by that, that's like, like what modifiers and cheats, like what you would use in like a multiplayer game. So like it would be something like, oh, when I kill an enemy, that enemy will explode like a barrel, and then you can have like chain reactions of all the enemies like exploding and dealing damage to one another. Or it could be something like, it could be something as basic as like invincibility, infinite ammo, like, just stuff like that. Stuff that like tweaks the way the game plays and like alters the experience when you're going through a level the second time.
That's genius. I'm very happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. Another thing is because like I did mention the cipher keys and how you'll have to find all the Scullies in a level to do that. I think the other concern some people might have is, that could get really tedious looking for all the secrets and stuff like that. But the one thing I will say about that is I feel like a lot of old school first-person shooters, especially because they're different map designers and stuff like that, level language changes up a lot. And what counts as a secret or what looks like a secret changes from level to level. And sometimes it's something, you could have something like in Ion Fury has a few secrets like this, where it's just where it's just like you can just like walk through a wall. It looks no different than like any other wall in the game, but you can just walk through it because, that's a secret. And that's super obtuse, and there's nothing like visually pointing to the fact that it's a secret. It's, it's just a thing you can do because, and like it makes hunting for secrets in games like that a lot more tedious than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Viscerafest, I make an active effort to make sure that every secret is in some way telegraphed. If like, for example, and I'm not really sure why more games didn't do this. I'm kind of surprised Dusk didn't do this, but like we have cracked walls, kind of like in Duke Nukem 3D and stuff like that. But all the cracked walls are actually like 3D modeled into the environments themselves. So like not only will you be able to see the crack, but you can also see the room behind the crack. So if there's like a little bit of light or something, like, it'll be a little bit eye catching. Like you'll be able to go, oh, there's like something there. If it's like a push wall, it's always slightly indented. If it's like I'm trying to think of what other kinds of secrets there might be off the top of my head. Like a shoot button secret, like there's a specific kind of button we'll use for all the secrets. Or even going beyond that, like other than just secrets, like level of readability in general, we try to be consistent with. Like one thing they do a lot in the original Doom games is like there is no consistency to what a liquid is. Like you could have water that damages you. Whereas in Viscerafest, it's like all the liquids are like color coded. So if it's like you got in level 3, there's like that bright cyan blue colored acid, and if you touch that, it's insta death, and it's at the bottom of the pit. You've got the green acid, which will it does damage over time, so it will slowly drain your health even after you've walked out of the acid. You got like regular lava and pink acid, which will just drain your health while you're standing in it. Or like in chapter 2, there will be like mud basically, where like one of the obstacles that we might put in some of the arenas is mud, where it's like it'll slow you down a little bit. So like you'll kind of have to like jump around and try to avoid getting in the mud, because otherwise you leave yourself vulnerable. And little things like that, where it's like you'll just be able to look at something and go, I know what that does. And if you're in like, especially like with the secrets, like if you're vigilant enough, if like you if you just have eyes and you can use them, like you'll be able to figure out where secrets are relatively easily.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not going to be like a chore to like hunt down everything.
I think we've covered level design, so let's move on to the next topic. I am extremely impressed by just thus far the story, and again, you said earlier we could talk about this forever, so let's just try to get the elevator pitch in. But my initial impression was like, okay, it's the year 3796. It's amazing to me how much the world has progressed socially, and yet how still completely fucked it all is. And this is I don't know, I love history and I love dissecting stuff like this. So first and foremost, the big thing is you get the animation at the beginning of the game, and Caroline wants to buy a ring and propose to her boyfriend, who is a one-eyed alien and is not the most masculine looking guy in the world. And
he's cute though.
He's cute though, but it's interesting. You've done this is a great time for this, and you've really clearly thought yourself through. I don't even know if it was organic or what, but you can touch on that when I'm done with my rant. That is such a really cool concept, and you're giving the female character, the female lead here, a lot of like power, and like this is just so cool, man. I don't even know how to articulate that. I think this is a genius idea.
Yeah. So, who Carolyn is and what the story has been has actually changed a lot through development. But I without going into all of it, effectively, a while back, I had reached this point where I was just looking at the story, and I was kind of like, man, this really isn't fitting with my game, because the story before really left no room for like any kind of lighthearted. Like it was just like it felt played very straight. I wouldn't say it was super dark. It was a little dark, but like the main thing was like it didn't really feel like I had room to like have any lightheartedness within the narrative or the game or the story itself without it feeling out of place. Because it's like, you have this bright neon colored game where it's like, everything is just so saturated. And then you've got like this kind of downer, straight, played really super straight and serious story that just didn't match what I had, the game I was making. And I was kind of like, I kind of reached this point where it's just like, I'm going to just completely rewrite it. I'm going to take some of what I have already and just retool it and make it into something new. And I was actually super concerned with actually writing the current version of the story, because as I feel like if I were to walk up to somebody and like somebody would ask me, so what is Viscerafest about? And they have asked me that, and I kind of walk up every single time someone asks me that and go, because it's when I describe what the story of Viscerafest is, it sounds like the kind of thing I would expect from like some edgy teenage girls like fanfic.
Yeah, it definitely does.
It totally sounds like that, but like in presentation and like the way it feels in game, you're just like, oh yeah, no, this is totally palatable. It doesn't feel like just cheesy or painful or corny. It's like it feels totally natural. Like you don't even question it, and it's like, to me, it's so weird to me that it's worked as well as it has. And not only that, but people have loved it as much as they have. It's been really exciting for me. But I will say that is just like what everyone knows of the story is really just the surface level. Like that is just the main character's motivation, and that's it. You've heard, if you've played the demo, you've heard a little bit of some light tidbits of where the story is heading. But I'll say, especially when you get to chapter 2, things really start to hit the wall in terms of like what the story eventually evolves into. And actually, in the theme of your show, it's very Lovecraft. Because so I'm trying to think. Around when I was doing that rewrite, I was also around the time that I had like first really gotten into Quake, and through Quake, I ended up falling in love with Lovecraft's writing. Like one of my favorite stories was, and still is my favorite Lovecraft story, the Dunwich Horror. Dunwich Horror. Yes, and actually,
by the way, we could literally just do a whole podcast on Lovecraft if you want.
No, but don't worry. I'll go more into why I'm bringing this up. So, but yeah, so I kind of fell in love with his work, and I was like, man, I want to do something with this. I can't not. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take some of this and try to incorporate it into Viscerafest. And effectively now what the game's universe is it's because for anyone who doesn't know, Lovecraft's work has no canon. There's like no one line just history or palette thing. Like it's kind of like anyone can do anything that they want with it. So with Viscerafest, it's actually like it's sort of like a far-flung sci-fi science fiction universe. Sci-fi and science fiction, same thing. But it's like it's set in like basically like the Lovecraft universe. Like just like straight up, and like because I feel like with a lot of old school FPS games, it's like, you know, they'll have like a Lovecraft thing in them, right? Mm-hmm. Like, but it always feels really tacked on to me. Like, and again, like I'm not knocking these games, but Quake and Dusk, like, I feel like, you know, Quake is just like a odd cocktail of ideas, and I love it. But Quake, it's narratively, almost nothing ties the game to Lovecraft. Like like the most Lovecraft thing in that is like the Shambler and the and Shub-Niggurath. But that's kind of just like that would be like if I were like making a Star Wars movie and just suddenly I had Dracula show up. You know, like it's not made a Dracula movie suddenly just because I throw Dracula in there. And kind of the same thing with Dusk. Like it has like Lovecraftian ideas and themes running throughout the game, but like just throwing a Lovecraft monster in at the end doesn't really feel right to me. Whereas with Viscerafest, like it's inherently baked into the lore of the universe. And not only that, but like I've effectively taken efforts to try and like expand on it in the context of the universe without like being disrespectful to his work. Because the main thing I love, maybe this will sound like heresy for me saying this, I don't like Lovecraft because I think his work is scary, because I really don't think his work is scary at all. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand the concepts. I understand, like, that's a lot of why people love Lovecraft. But for me, this is just the reason I love his work so much. It's just because I find, like, the worlds and the just all the different, like, species, not just species, but, like, I guess concepts that are tied to the creatures and the things themselves to be interesting. I'm always fascinated listening to his books, and that's some of like what I wanted to pull into Viscerafest. So kind of what I've done is usually I try to, because like, you know, Lovecraft is very vague about what he does, and there is still a degree to where like we try to maintain that vagueness. But when like expanding on some of his stuff, what I'll do is I'll take like a central core concept that he runs with some of his entities. And I try to use that as the basis to expand upon his ideas with them. So, like, a great example. This is not an entity that appears in the game, but it is something that exists in the universe, and that is the outer god Yog-Sothoth. the kind of the central concept that exists with him is like, knowledge, the fear of knowledge, and things of that nature. So one of the things regarding his lore in the Viscerafest universe is that, for one, nobody really knows what Yog-Sothoth is. And a lot of his followers actually have like different theories on what Yog-Sothoth is. Some believe that he's like, he's actually like, he's not simply one consciousness, but he's the conglomeration of every consciousness of every living being within the known universe, which is like basically how he knows everything. And basically when like a being dies, like its consciousness is kind of just absorbed into the mass that is Yog-Sothoth. But in essence, like, it's really kind of like, Yog-Sothoth is everyone. And it's like everyone acting independently. But like that's effectively like where all his knowledge comes from. In reality, he's not really a being. He's like a conglomeration of beings. Whereas conversely, some of his like followers will believe like, he is physically multiple beings, but that all these beings share one consciousness, and they kind of like
a hive mind.
Yeah, they kind of observe every form of reality there is, and they're constantly just like absorbing this information and feeding it all into one central consciousness. And that's just like a kind of a loose example of like how I like take like one concept and like I try to expand upon it in a way that like it almost answers some questions, but in a way it almost asks more about like the creatures and the things within his universe. And like I said, that's not an entity that's going to be in the game, but we do stuff like that with some of like where the story ends up going, and like with the beings who are in the game, because there are several gods that appear in the game. I won't say which ones because they're pretty spoilery, or I consider them spoilery anyways. But it's something I'm really excited for people to actually see, because it results in like this very interesting tonal shift throughout the course of the game, where you play the devil. Like, it starts out very lighthearted, and like Carolyn never really changes who she is throughout the course of the game. Her goal is always what you saw it is. But
right, kill the warlock, get the money, buy the ring.
But like you quickly end up finding out like the characters who are kind of almost portrayed as like the villains at the start of the game, you end up finding out like there's a lot more to like what they're doing and what's going on than just the surface level, hey, they're bad guys doing bad things. And on that, there's also like a shift from like the more lighthearted to like a darker perspective. It always maintains this aura of like self-awareness and being not like cheesy self-awareness, but like never being too afraid to have fun with itself, I'll say. But at the same time, like I said, there is like that darker tonal shift, and it's really interesting. I think in practice it will be, because it's just like it's such like I'm trying to think of who mentioned this, but combining like two very different, especially visually different concepts, always results in something that's very, very interesting. Like with Doom, it was like sci-fi, far-flung future technology and hell. Or, with Quake, kind of the same thing, but like, medieval times and like lots of things like that. It's always more interesting when you combine two very different concepts like butt heads and having the shift between the two. It results in an experience that is not only more compelling, but it leaves a lot of intrigue, I think, because it's like, when you start the game, you establish what's familiar, you establish what's normal. And then as you progress through the game, with the more and more you move away from that, the more and more exciting it gets, not just from a narrative perspective, but from like a level design and from a gameplay perspective, because it's like you're moving more and more into like this territory that you're not really familiar with, because the universe makes it clear that this is not normal. But yeah, so.
and to all our pothead listeners out there who just went on a fucking journey, but.
No, but in addition to that, like I mentioned, like kind of the ways in which we expand on the universe, but like there is a lot of lore. Like I mentioned the hub, and the hub, as you progress through the game, you're going to be able to unlock lore bits in the library, which you'll be able to like read and find out more about, not just like the Viscerafest side of the universe, but like the Lovecraftian side of the universe as well. You'll be able to learn about more who the main character is, because the main character is not human, or at least not entirely human. In fact, actually, going off of that, one choice I made relatively early on, I think, was humans are actually almost extinct in the Viscerafest universe. Because I was just like, every sci-fi universe has like humans as the central focus. Why not just kind of get rid of them? Like Earth is like in a post-apocalyptic state for the most part. There are just like a few like biosphere almost like areas where there is life, and like there are people living there still. But for the most part, like Earth is like a relatively dead planet. But like there's a lot to the Viscerafest universe. Like actually, even ignoring like the library, there's a bestiary, and in the bestiary there will be like descriptions of like the enemies and their species, and not only that, but then there'll be descriptions of like how this specific species came in line like with whatever faction it's in, and so like there's just lots and lots of stuff that it's genuinely interesting stuff, and like whenever I bounce it off of people are like, man, like, that's a lot. I didn't expect this to be as like intricately detailed as it was. Like it was funny. I was talking to the artist. You've seen like the art that's used in the main menu.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this one bird enemy type who appears in the game. It's called the species. It's called the Calavian. The actual like enemy type's name is it's the Thunderbird, but the species name it's the Calavian. And when we were doing that art initially, she had drawn feathers on the enemy type in the picture. And I was like, no, it doesn't have feathers because the species itself can have feathers, but the thing is it's kind of like a status and cultural thing, and there are a lot of times where these species, they don't actually end up blooming, and they're kind of outcast and ostracized from the rest of their society. And when the USC kind of like made a treaty with this species, a part of that treaty was in order to like, so the Calavian species kind of suffers from overpopulation, especially due to the ones who never bloom, which basically just means like they never really get their feathers. So those ones are kind of ostracized from society, but they're kind of like intruding on like the normal class's way of life. So in order to kind of compensate for this, when they made the treaty with the USC, who are like kind of like the starting enemy faction, they basically started like taking them and just like shipping them off to the USC to basically be used as like security and soldiers and stuff like that. And so I had to sit there, and rather than saying, yeah, don't put feathers on it, I sat there and explained to the artist, like, hey, like, he can't have feathers because that doesn't make sense for specifically this enemy type.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have a creative guy working on something for 8 years and you just have all the time in the world to think. It's almost like Tolkien, the way you're describing, where there's just so much going on in the background. There's like a whole moving world that exists kind of behind the scenes.
Or like another one, so like the Zethrins, who are like the most standard enemy type. They have like the green eye, and like they have green skin, the green eye, and they fire like the 3-round burst. That enemy type is like so they're actually a completely manufactured species. They're not a naturally occurring species in the universe. They're basically genetically modified and created, and they're bred to be specifically female. One, to prevent, so like, because they sell them. They sell this species as like basically work force, and they're manufactured by this company called Dermatech, who does lots of different genetic stuff. But yeah, so they're manufactured, they're sold as like slaves or soldiers and stuff like that, and they are bred to have very, very short lifespans in order to ensure return customers, and they're bred to be specifically female in order to prevent, or not bred, I should say, they're cloned to be specifically female, so that way as to prevent them from ever like mating and like like a buyer being able to like get more of them, let's say.
Yeah, we could tie that into like Star Wars, and we could tie that into Game of Thrones too, with the way that happens. But I don't want to believe that in the year 3796 we're still gonna have fucking slavery and caste systems and racism.
Yeah.
I guess no, this is fun. This is a really fun like post-apocalyptic kind of universe.
And like I said, it's just Earth that's in a post-apocalypse. Most of the rest of the universe is kind of just fine. I mean, it's the rest of the universe with all the highs and lows that could bring. But yeah, like you said, it's just been having that much time to work on this game. Like I put a lot of effort and thought into everything, and I actually wasn't even going to include lore originally in the final product, but Fire Plant, the guy who's helping me work on it, he was really pushing for that. He was like, "Man, you've put so much time and effort into this. Like, we got to put into the game somehow." So,
how is it courting publishers with that in your back pocket, like all that luggage with you?
I haven't actually. We haven't gone for a publisher.
Okay, is it straight up indie?
For right now, I mean, Markie has been talking about maybe sending a build to Fred at 3D Realms. And don't like honestly, like
I know Fred.
Yeah, he. But yeah, no. The thing for me is, I would totally love to. Sorry, my brain just farted. I would totally love to do this full time. I would absolutely love to. I would love to quit my miserable job right now, which has only been made more miserable by the fact that we put the demo out, because all I can think about now is, man, I wish I were at home working on the game.
Dude, same. Every moment that I'm at my day job, I'm just like, this is so many hours I could be being actually productive. That's how I feel every time I'm there.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like, and that's like the only reason really I would want to pursue a publisher. But I guess my main fear is I don't want to sacrifice on anything that I'm doing. I don't want to have to like make any big changes because someone higher up is like, nah, we can't do that, or whatever. I would love to work with 3D Realms. I have no idea if they would even be remotely interested in working with me on this game. But I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is just going to be time. Because, I mean, if I can sit down and work on this full time, I absolutely would. And not only that, but it would get done a heck of a lot faster than it would if I have to work a day job. But, and I think that's my biggest fear with getting a publisher is like, I would need to get paid in some capacity. I would need to make some kind of income. Just because, like, I need to be able to survive. But
there's nothing wrong with that either.
No.
I hate when people act like that's not. I've gone on so many rants on this podcast about, like, fucking get paid. Like, seriously get paid.
Yeah.
If you can.
But, like, I mean, like, I would love to work 3D Realms. My biggest thing is just going to be, though, like, I'm not going to be reliably able to get anything done unless I can work on this thing full time, especially not with my current job, or really any job going forward if I have to work full time on something.
You're crowdsourcing?
No, it's all but.
Fuck me, dude.
I've been doing this. So yeah, I mean, I won't talk about how much I pay anyone or anything like that, but like the people I have paid and the people who are working with me who I've given money to, I'll say I'm paying them less than I probably should be, but because of that, I always make sure that, like, when I can afford to pay them more, because like that's a big thing. It's like being able to afford to pay them.
Yeah.
If I can't afford to pay someone more, I will. Like, I'll just throw them in a bonus that they weren't expecting, because I want to support them. Like, I want to give everyone I work with way more money than I am, and I think it really sucks for me, because I'm just like, man. If I could, I would totally just like throw all my money at these people, but because the level of quality and the craftsmanship and the work that everyone has brought to it, whether it be Markie with the music and the sound, whether it be Mariah and Sarah and Trixie with some of the art they've done for like the cutscene and the promotional stuff, or the character turnarounds that they've done, or Fire Plant with his just immaculate coding and his just. To me, it just sucks that I can't support these people more. But I mean, like, I would love to, like I said, I would absolutely love to work for 3D Realms if I could. If that ends up panning out, I mean, I would be more than happy. The main thing really is, one, I'm not sure if they would be willing to work with me if I weren't able to consistently get stuff done, because, I'm sure they want to ship the game out by a certain point. They're going to want to, get things done within a reasonable time scale. And being forced to wait on me because I have to, go to work, and then I can only work on the game for a couple hours every night. Like, I just don't know that they're going to have the patience to put up with that, or even want to. Or I'm not sure if they would be interested in even working with me on the game at all. I mean, maybe they're just like, man, this doesn't reach our bar of quality, because I mean, you look at Iron, I think the game looks aesthetically pleasing, but like the game is nowhere near as detailed as something like Wrath or Ion Fury. Like, it is a much more visually simple game. than either of those titles, and I'm just not sure.
Well,
yeah,
Ion Fury was born of 3D Realms. Like they hired a team with an idea kind of already in place.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a different dynamic, from hiring an indie or buying an indie, I should say, to, hiring a team that's already established to build a game that you've already fleshed out. Two totally different processes. But yeah, I mean, don't even close your doors. Like 3D Realms isn't the only game in town. I genuinely would love to see that, but whatever happens, happens. I would also say, man, like, do you want me to set up your Patreon account for you? Like, you should be. Like, do you need a Patreon? You need Venmo? You need PayPal?
I feel.
Do you want a ThinkSpot account? Like, OnlyFans? Like, whatever you got to do to get it out there. Like,
I mean, honestly, like the biggest thing for me is I just I don't want to one. If I would have a Patreon, I just don't know that I could provide enough to give back to people who are supporting me on that. But in addition to that, I just
be honest about it, and it's not a problem. Let them, if they want to support your game, let them support it. I'm not going to let you go on this. You got to be crowdsourcing, dog. You're talking about money. You're talking about paying people. If you need to do that, and your fans, the people who support you, are willing to help you out, let them help you.
Yeah, I mean, especially to me, I'm like, if I'm going to make money, I prefer to do it via the method of putting a product in somebody's hands, because I feel like at the very least, they're not just throwing money at me for the sake of throwing money at me. They're throwing money at me because I'm giving them something that, again, they think is worth their time. But yeah,
not everybody's going to think it's worth their time, but some people might say it's worth my time to support an indie dev who is making something that I'm looking forward to and who has reason to need the money. It's not like you're going to take it and fucking put it in your wallet, quit making the game, and go take a cruise in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm trying to pay my guys who are helping me with the game. I want to, make sure you have the best quality when it's out. And then when it's out, just offer them a free copy and a t-shirt or, whatever you can do. Like that's fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to force you. But,
yeah.
Where's your address? I'm coming up. The last big tangent I wanted to go on was working with Michael. I'm going to have him on the podcast sometime in the near future. I think is kind of like a sequel follow-up to you. And also for everything else he's done. But how did that relationship?
Oh yeah, no, I was going to mention that earlier because I mentioned the other guy who is doing music for me, but I totally forgot to talk about that. So I'm actually pretty glad you brought that up. So I was working with that other guy for a while, and he was doing all right. He got me 2 songs, and then there was kind of just this dead period, right? And what I ended up finding, he was trying to get back into it at some point, but then he was working a 50-hour-a-week job on top of doing college. So he did not have the time or the energy to work on music at all, period. He didn't have time or energy to do anything other than his work and, his classes and stuff like that, which, is totally understandable. So I said, so he was saying, look, I don't think I can do this anymore. I was like, yeah, no, I totally understand. That's fine. But, this kind of left me open with no composer. And especially at that point, I was wrapping up development on the Blender version of Chapter 2. So I was like, I got to need music fast. So I was browsing around. I was asking people, if they could recommend composers to me. I had stumbled on to the Quake Champions Doom Edition soundtrack on YouTube. And I was listening to it. And I think at some point I had seen a separate link to his Quake, to his remake of the Quake theme that he did. And then I was kind of looking at his channel, and I saw he did a video where he said, yeah, so basically the guy I offered to do work for the Quake Champions Doom Edition guys for free on their mod. And so I was thinking, oh, this isn't some industry professional. He's totally attainable. I could ask him, and I would, obviously, I'm gonna pay him. There's no way in hell I'm not gonna pay him for the work he does. But I was like, man, I could actually maybe this would work. I could reach out to this guy and then I started going through some more of his music, and then I stumbled on the fact that he had remade he had remade the theme song for Marathon de Randall, which was one of the original inspirations for Viscerafest. Was the Marathon games made by Bungie way back in the day. And I was just like, well, now I have to hire him. So I shot him an email, and I was like, hey, I'm working on this game. Sent him a trailer. I was like, I'd be more than willing to pay you for the work you do. I kind of like told him like what I was thinking my price range would be for paying for the songs. And he was like, yeah, sure. Like, let's do this. And so he joined my Discord, and we ended up working together from there for a while. And so he had made the first song we made was going into the music. First thing I told him was like kind of like what I wanted the music to be on the whole in regards to like the project, which was basically I wanted the music to reflect the progression of the game. So for starters, like the game's soundtrack starts out like very simply, right? And this has kind of been done to reflect the idea that you're in a familiar place. Like the synth music is very technological sounding, and there's comfort and familiarity. And when I think of something that's like comfort and familiar, like I think of something that's like very artificial, like like your bedroom or something like that. Your bed, like that's man-made. It's very comfortable. So like I kind of wanted to have use the synth to reflect that of you being somewhere that's very familiar and very safe. And then as you progress through the game, more and more metal starts getting introduced to kind of begin to signal the shift away from that. And then you go to chapter 2, which has like Oriental music, which is more like naturalistic, which starts to begin the shift towards something that's less familiar, like the wild and things of that nature. And then you get to chapter 3, which is like full on like heavy metal industrial, and like full on like the Quake theme, basically, which again is kind of like meant to reflect like the chaos and like the incomprehensibility of where you are and what's going on. And so he's like, yeah. And so then we started working on the theme song, and we wanted to take some of those elements and kind of use that to create a central theme around the game that would kind of like encompass the ideas that were present within the game itself. And on top of that, I said the main thing I want with the theme especially is I want it to be a song that sticks in people's heads. Because, and again, I'm not knocking some of these other retro FPS games that have come out, but like I can't really think of a recent first-person shooter that's come out where like it's had a memorable theme song. Because I'm like, okay, like what is when you think of like the Dusk soundtrack, like Dusk soundtrack, I think it's a great soundtrack, but like, what is the Dusk song? Like, what is the Dusk sound? Like, because when I think of Doom, I think of E1M1. I think of Doom's Gate. Like, when I think of the Quake, I think of the Quake theme. When I think of Doom,
it sounded more like Cowboy Bebop.
When I think of Duke Nukem, I think of the Duke Nukem theme. When I think of Blood, I think of the song in Cradle to Grave. I think of Infamous. Or the Shadow War, like all these games, they have like the song that is their identity, right? And with a lot of these more recent FPS games, I was like, man, I'm not really getting the vibe that any of these games care about getting that kind of song. Like, it's not that they have bad soundtracks. They just don't really seem to like go for that, this song is my identity kind of vibe. And so that was really something I wanted to establish with the Viscerafest theme song, which is just called Viscerafest. So that was the first track he made. And it was funny, actually, because he sent that track to me, and there's this one ambient bit toward, like, the middle of the track. And that was originally where it ended. And I think the reason he had done that is because he kind of wanted it to be like the Quake theme, where it starts off, it's really upbeat, it's got, like, heavy metal and stuff like that. But then you get to like the latter portion of the song, and it's just kind of like it ends on quiet ambience. And I said, I kind of wanted something a bit more notable and something more like just like hoorah for like the ending. So it's like,
yo, DJ, bring that beat back, like.
And so 4 hours later, he sends me the song again, and it's 2 minutes longer.
Yeah.
Because it was already like 2 minutes long, but he sends it like 4 hours later. He sends it back to me. It's 2 minutes longer, and it's like this entire like epic final part of the song. So then, and like it's kind of just been like on and off working on songs since then, because especially like with the Unity build, the primary way he works is he wants to know like what is the level going to be before I make a song, which I mean obviously duh, but when we're actually so like we can't just like say hey make this song for the chapter 2 level that doesn't exist yet, and so. For the most part, I kind of let him do his own thing. I mean, like I said, there is like that kind of like basis on which like the soundtrack is meant to reflect on kind of like what the themes of the game is, and as you progress through the game, and like how the music changes and adapts throughout the course of the experience. But on the whole, when he's making a song, I'm pretty hands off with what he does, just because I feel like if I were to try to funnel him into truly doing one thing, one, I don't know anything about music, so I wouldn't be the one to, I'll make suggestions here or there if I want something different with a song, but I don't like say, hey, the song has to be this. For the most part, I leave him to his own devices, but moving away from music, because he does way more than just music for the game, he also does all of our sound now. But Markie was like, hey, so, we put the music in the game, and it sounds great, but, like, the sounds, they really don't feel like they fit with the music, because, like, the way I had made the sounds was substantially different to, like, the quality of his audioscape and the way in which he handles his audio stuff. So it was like, hey, do you mind if, would you be okay if I made sounds for the game? And I said no, because that was something that, like, I really wanted to do. It was something I had a lot of fun doing. He had ended up remaking the pistol sound, and I wasn't a fan of it at first. But over time, it kind of grew on me, and I was like, okay, I'll let you do some stuff. So he started out, and he just did the weapons. But then I think when we started transitioning over to the Unity build, that's when like he kind of took over completely in terms of like what we were doing with sound design and stuff like that. What he has done is like I can't begin to praise him enough for it. So like every single gun has like probably like 5 to 6 different firing sounds, and like not just like pitch shifted, but like completely different firing sounds. And it's the same for like most of the pickups. It's the same for like all of the enemy sounds. On top of the enemy sounds having some slight pitch shifting. Not only that, but like so with the audioscape itself, we're using Fmod, and it allows us to do a lot of things. So like sounds will actually echo in bigger rooms, and not only that, but he's made different ambient sounds that scale to the size of the room. So like if you're in a really big room, if you turn off the music, you'll be able to hear it. Where the ambient sound will kind of like as you walk from like a small room to like a bigger open space, like the audio will kind of like suck out as like you enter this like large space, and it's just like it is like beautiful. It is like downright artistic what he has done with the audioscape. I really can't praise him enough for that. Like it is just like yeah. But then like on top of that, we've also been doing a lot with like telegraphing stuff better than I did in the Blender version. Like I don't know how many people noticed this. Like we made some tweaks to it, so it's a bit more substantial in the new patch. But the enemies, all of them, like if it's like an enemy that has like a gun or something, like every time before they fire at you, you'll hear their gun click. That way you have like, right. Even if like, so it's like they're not just suddenly shooting at you. Like you can have a little bit of an audio cue, and you can like figure out like, hey, maybe there's an enemy I didn't see or didn't.
Right, like they're turning off the safety or something.
Yeah, and they're about to like go full bore on me, so I had better get out of dodge. And like all the enemies have stuff like that, where like every time before they attack you, like they'll let you know they're attacking you, and like sometimes it will be really quick and really subtle, and sometimes it will be like a more substantial, depending on like what kind of attack it is and things of that nature, how easy it is to avoid. But yeah, no, like his audio work, his music work, like I mean, like honestly, like I can say this without sounding self-indulgent because I didn't make the music. The Viscerafest soundtrack is legitimately my favorite soundtrack. I listened to all the songs so many times, and I love them. I really do. I sometimes I'll catch myself humming some of them while I'm just like at work or something like that. Especially the song "Burned from Both Ends," which is the first boss track. That song is just it's wonderful. But yeah, I really can't. I could not ask for a better composer, and quite frankly, I don't want to.
All right, man. We've done quite a bit of time here. I just want to say that I'm having seen the game as it stands right now, and then hearing all of this other stuff, I legitimately can't wait to see your vision realized, and I wish you the best of luck in doing that.
Thank you.
Also, like, it is extremely inspiring to see someone like you coming, from your background and with just at the age you're at. I hate to keep bringing that up, but like, to see you with this much drive and this much passion and this much vision that you're able to kind of dictate and realize in real time, even though it's a slow going real time, it's really inspiring. And I'm just proud to have spent this time kind of getting to know you, man. I'm looking forward to having you on again when, you have something new to release and when the game fully releases, and years from now when you have other projects that you've learned from this on.
Thank you. Yeah, it was nice talking with you.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you to Markie Music for the incredible soundtrack here, and also thank you to Awesreek for being on the fucking show, man. That kid is amazing. I never get to say kid. I'm only doing that to fuck with him. But seriously, that was really cool conversation for me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it. Also, thank you to all of you out there listening. That's the best way you can fucking support the show, man, is just to listen, and especially tell other people that you listen to it. Tell them they should listen to it. And, just spread the word, man. That's what it's all about. We're a community of people who help each other out. So hopefully you help us out, and hopefully we find a way to help you out. If you would like to be a little more supportive, you can join this amazing list of people that I'm about to talk about. Dots Moose, Paul, Zach, Alexander, Lashaka, Brad, Night Owl, Tones, Jeffrey, Larissa, Nabe, Steve, NVZ, Catman, Semico, Chibi Sniper, Donkey, VJ Tenjin, Haducant, Brandflakes, Molekiter Rao, Red Eyes Green Dragon, Anthony, Robert, Vince, Amorpher, Igrax, Simon, Gelmo, and Russell. All of you are amazing motherfuckers who have donated in some way or given some kind of time or effort or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. You've supported the show in a greater way. And if you out there are listening and you'd like to be part of that group, head over to inthekeep.com/support, or just click on the support tab once you get to inthekeep.com. And you can find all the different ways to support us there. We have affiliate links. Do your shopping through Amazon. From that link, no matter what you buy, it'll help out the cause. You can become a Patreon supporter. You can give to us on PayPal. I think the Venmo page is up. Not sure. Not going to check right now. But when it's up, you can use it. Haha. And also just like, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you don't have anything to give, that's fine. If you don't want to give, that's also okay. You can just listen to the show. Doesn't make you a bad person. But if you do want to give a little extra, all Patreon supporters, once they have reached the $25 mark, get an In The Keep t-shirt. It is awesome. Or you can just go over to our merch tab and purchase one right out from our Redbubble store. We also have awesome Sigil of Cathala masks over there in case you need to hide your ugly mug. We have stickers. We've got a long sleeve t-shirt option. Once you get on the Redbubble page, the sky's the limit. You can buy anything you want. I've got the tapestry that you guys see in the streams off of that site, actually. But yeah, there's all kind of fucking options for you. So exercise them if you so choose. All of the money will go to supporting the cause here, whether that be paying some of the folks who help out, or for keeping the servers running if that's needed, or eventually maybe starting off a nice career in podcasting for a certain handsome individual, but not right yet. We'll get there eventually. But yeah, man, go check out Vince Steele on YouTube. He is an amazing, amazing motherfucker. Check out QuakeFans.net and QuakeFans Radio. Tell Smango that the Motherload sent you. Get on over to RocketJump.zone if you love arena shooters and want to participate in some amazing events. Same thing with the multiplayer Doom Federation, and as I mentioned earlier, the Take the Crown tournament is coming up, so get your ass signed up right the fuck now before it's too late. US Quake community is also an amazing place that you can go to and get involved in lots of multiplayer Quake and Doom events and just be around a nice, positive group of very, very kind people. All of them are just perfect gentlemen. Tell them Motherload sent you. With that said, please go out there and support your indies. Show them your love. Take care of yourself. Take care of everyone else around you if you can. And until next time, stay in the keep. Oh, and by the way, at the top of the show, when I mentioned the big announcement, and then I said the thing about the Doom Federation, that's a big announcement, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't it. Next week, you will get the announcement that you've been waiting for, and I am deeply excited to tell you all about it.